Good morning, ladies. It is almost NFL Week 1, though it kind of started already, and we're going to talk about that in just a second. But we are just about 24 hours away from the Sunday kickoff, and it is the second episode of the MFL podcast. But before we get started, I think we should have a moment of silence for the Queen. I know how important she was to the league and Steve Horvath, and yeah. Anyway, like Horvath always says, the Queen's dead. Long live the king. Let's move on to fantasy football. Metzger, good morning. How are you doing today, buddy?
Doing great. Yourself?
Oh, always fantastic. We're up at 8:00 in the morning talking fantasy league football for our league. What could be better, right? So,
Nothing is better. I don't have to give the kids breakfast. I'm here with
exactly.
you. This is dealing with anything with them. So
Yeah, a league motto. Fuck them kids. But so before we jump into the week, which is what we're going to kind of be doing moving forward. So the show is likely going to be on Saturdays. I know a few of you have reached out to me about guesting, and we're going to get you on here. We're going to talk about the last week, preview the next week. There's nothing to talk about for last week, except for there were some trades, Dan. When I was looking over the my league outlook, things have changed greatly, and one team has worked themselves firmly into last place. But let's start with the first trade, which was Brian and Taylor. Brian acquiring Justin Jefferson for Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, a 2 and a 3. Kenny did not like this trade. What was your take on it, Dan?
great trade for Taylor, a good trade for Phil, and a terrible trade for Brian.
See, I don't necessarily hate it for Brian if you know you're looking to lose and build for the future, but my goodness, is he going to lose? Brian would be the team that is now firmly in last place. I don't know that he wins a match. So a very interesting fucking trade. So
that's why I have Phil as a winner. He's no longer the worst team in the league. So congratulations.
I was going to ask why you brought up Phil.
He's no longer the worst team. He should be happy. I know that he was a little upset that I called him the worst team last week, but hey, congratulations, buddy. You're moving right up.
You slipped it in there on me.
Every week, just work your way up one more spot by team.
Now, what's funny is I think Kenny did the same because Kenny was my last place team. And guess what? He's no longer the last place team. I guess the real question, let's talk about the second trade first, and then I'll get to the real question. And that was after Kenny bitched and moaned and cried about how awful this trade was and just got Taylor all riled up, which we all know you don't need to get Taylor riled up. He's already at a 9 most days. He goes and makes a trade with Brian, and Brian acquires CeeDee Lamb, a 1 and a 3, for Najee Harris, a 5 and a 6. So what do we feel about this trade?
I mean, good trade for Kenny. I mean, I don't understand what Brian's doing. I mean, I guess I do. He wants to lose. I can't fathom wasting an entire year and not trying to win, especially for Brian, because he's the magic man. If he would have had those 3 keepers he had and worked another trade or 2 out another way, he could easily have been a competitive team this year. And he didn't even feel like doing that, apparently.
I'm just happy that we're not going to have a back-to-back champion because that was something I was shooting for, and fuck Brian. So
we don't have to worry about you getting that either, so it's fine.
Well, not till next year. I have to win this year first. I look at this trade as a win for Brian. I understand what Kenny was going for, but if you look at our league as a quasi-dynasty league with the keepers, you want young wide receivers, and CeeDee Lamb is actually younger than Najee Harris. So I'm actually really good with this trade, but I don't think this quote can go unsaid to the entire league because we said it on Call of Duty to Brian's face.
Best quote of the year
is nobody turns 3 great players into 2 great players like Brian Maguire. And so that is certainly what happened in this situation.
I get the whole age factor, but to me, I'm just not a big believer in CeeDee Lamb becoming that Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase type player that some people think he will be. We'll see what he does this year, but I'm not a big believer in him. So to me, on my side, I think Kenny came out of that in a great situation.
Yeah, Brian has the best last place wide receivers in the league. I think that's really what it comes down to. It reminds me of an old quote from, I think it was Babe Ruth, who said, "Let's call this team the Goobers because they're fucking disgusting." And that is what Brian's team is at this point because Brian loves Goobers and his team is absolute trash. There was one other trade, and you and I kind of went back and forth on this one. Xavier and Horvath went out. Xavier took our advice. He knew how much we hated his wide receivers, and he went out and bought Rashad Bateman for a 1. And I know you do not like it, but I go ahead and tell the world that you don't like it.
Well, one of Horvath's advantages was the amount of depth he had on his team. And I think that he just lost part of that. And I get getting a 1, great. You're set up, in a better spot for next year. But if you're a team that's competing for a championship this year, and I think he is, I just don't think that was the best move on his part. Xavier, yeah, good move on his part. Move your 1. Now, if I was him, I'm moving a 1. I'd probably want more of a player that's proven themselves a little more than Bateman has, because you just don't know necessarily what you're getting out of him at this point, especially in that offense. And if you're giving up a 1, someone you probably would want to keep long term. And if, who knows what happens to Lamar Jackson if he's not there next year? Do you trust Bateman beyond that? Do you really trust Bateman this year? There's potential to be a great player. So I get that part of it, but I just don't know if I'd give up a 1 for potential.
Yeah, I'm good with both sides of it. I love Horvath's starting wide receivers, and I think he can work the flex position as long as he works the waivers and plays his bench right. I absolutely adore his starting wide receivers with Mike Evans and Keenan Allen. So I don't think it hurts him as much, and plus he gains the draft capital. And for Horvath, the draft capital is a big thing. Sometimes it's the other way around for Horvath, where he gives it up and gets nothing back for it during the season. With X, I'm okay with giving up the 1 for Rashad Bateman because he is a wide receiver 1, and X is a sharp guy. I know he follows the league, and I like Rashad Bateman this year. I don't know if he's going to rise to the elevation of like a wide receiver 1 in our league, but his team it just wasn't it. Whereas Bateman in London is much more stomach old than Bateman in London and Sky Moore. So I think it was a good trade on both sides of it. But the way more important question that comes from all this is last week we gave our playoff teams and we gave our last place team, and clearly both of our last place teams have changed to the same terrible last place team. Go Brian. Have your playoff teams changed with this trade at all, Dan? The main thing I'll throw out real quickly is I had Taylor as fighting, and now when you add Tyreek Hill to your flex spot, I have Taylor as a flat out in at this point.
Yeah, I agree. I think Taylor, barring some kind of injury type situation with his team, should be a person that's in the playoffs for sure now. Although I'm sure he's a little nervous after seeing what Stafford did.
Save that for later.
It was so bad though. We might want to talk about it twice.
Oh, I think we're going to probably talk about it multiple times.
I'm sure Taylor's thought about it more than twice already.
It was rough as an Allen Robinson manager. It was rough.
So. Someone had him on their team? Really? Interesting.
Yeah, and started him. What wonderful, wonderful. Again, let's save that for later. Did it change your playoff teams?
Yeah. I think it put a little more like myself, because of injuries, Terry, and a little bit more jeopardy of being in the playoffs.
Okay. See, my top 4 stayed roughly the same, except Taylor moved way to the top of the top 4. So my top 4 are me, Stevie, Terry, and Taylor. It did shake things up in 2 different aspects for me. Darren was, I believe, near the top for me. I think Xavier could actually win one of his games against Darren. I was really down on Xavier until he filled his roster out, and I like him way more now. So I have him as fighting for a spot. But I think this put you and Rob with a very good advantage of taking those last 2 playoff spots. And now Darren, Horvath, JR, and Xavier are chasing you guys, in my opinion. Obviously, you guys are watching this, so you care about our opinions, though Brian seems to really think that we love ourselves just a little bit too much. But he won't come on the show and refute us, so I guess everything we say is right at this point, right?
Oh, yeah, I agree. And I would add Stevie to that list of bubble teams now as well, before I thought he was in. Now I think he's questionable as well.
Stevie is the best fucking team in the league. Stevie's bench could beat Brian every single week this year. In fact, I'm gonna pay attention to that. I bet Stevie's bench beats Brian multiple weeks this year.
Stevie does have a deep bench, but how many points a week does he get for how deep his bench is?
It doesn't matter. He has great starters as well.
He does have great starters. I think he has good starters. And is he going to start the right guys every week?
I believe in Stevie. Yes, he is going to start the right guys every week. I like every part of his team. I'm looking it over right now. I happen to have had that matchup up. And no part of his team do I look at it and be like, that was a mistake. Shit, I thought the Buffalo Bills this week were a mistake, and they're going to be the number 1 fantasy defense after what they did to Matt Stafford.
You never know. I mean, I don't trust Mitchell. I don't trust Hall. I don't know.
You're struggling just to find guys to hate on his team. And he even started Breece Hall
before he even had Fournette on his team. I wasn't a big fan of Fournette. So
I'm not a big fan of Fournette either, but I think he has a solid enough team at every position. It's just funny that you have him as a playoff bubble team and I have him as by far the best team in the league, like by a long shot, the best team in the league. All right, let's get into week one. I saved our matchups for last. So we're going to start with probably the easiest matchup to talk about. I don't know how much time we want to spend to this, but talk about it as much as you want. We got Terry versus Brian. What's your takeaways here? In case you don't have it up right now, neither do I. I was going to say Terry jumps off to a 6-0 lead. The projections have him winning 118 to 100 right now.
Well, the fact that Terry already has 6 points means he might already have Brian beat. I mean,
fair enough. He's certainly going to outscore his running backs.
Tua could already get negative points, I think the game's over. Terry's got the win. Chalk it up.
I mean, apparently you read my notes because I literally the first thing I wrote was easy Terry dub. Nothing to discuss here. Brian needs his wide receivers to drop 40 each. But the bigger note that I went back and did a little research, the biggest win in our league history is 127.77 by Taylor. And I personally think it's in jeopardy this week when Mike Davis and Travis Homer do absolutely nothing for Brian. I hope Brian, like that guy wrote the letter to Amon-Ra St. Brown, I hope Brian has done that for his running backs because my goodness, they need motivation.
All right, 2 things. One, if I think Brian could actually have, break the record at some point this year, I don't think this will be the week because I think there's at least a chance that Homer and Davis get more carries this week than they will at any other week this year.
That's fair.
What would hurt more for you? Brian coming out and just having a great week somehow and winning, having to listen to that, or the fact that Cole Kmet would have a great week and just make you look bad that way too? Which one?
I would rather listen to Brian for the 5 hours a week we play Call of Duty than the incessant Twitter rants I'm going to get every single time Cole Kmet catches a ball, let alone has a good week. So go Brian if I have to weigh those two things. This is not much of a choice for me.
He has Cole Kmet, so they can both leave.
I know. I need it to not be the same thing. I see what you're saying. It would suck either way. I just need Cole Kmet to not do well ever. I'm already off, and we'll get to this. Is it my next matchup? It is my next matchup. So let's jump into my next matchup because I'm getting praise on Twitter right now for being Fantasy Pro's lowest ranked expert for Cam Akers this season. People have found out that I was down on Cam Akers. I mean, I wrote articles about it. Some people in our league read those articles and still decided to keep Cam Akers. And so we have JR versus Kenny. Let me get the matchup up here. And so it looks like JR is currently down 9-0. JR has not, I don't even think had a player. Oh no, he did. He got the 0 out of Cam Akers. What am I saying? So not looking absolutely great for JR right now. The projection is Kenny winning 107-92. JR might have, what is that, the lowest projection in the league, including Brian? Oof. I guess that's what happens when you keep 2 running backs who aren't playing in week 1. So what's your take on this matchup, Dan?
I mean, JR is obviously in trouble. It's going to be a long season for him as well. Again, I don't understand it because he had 4 first-round picks. We've covered that. Kenny should get the easy dub. He won't get too many of those this year with that team, but enjoy it this week, Kenny. Here's to you.
My notes just say Cam Akers and then LOL a whole bunch of times because fuck Cam Akers. And I don't know who has James Robinson. Oh, wait, did Kenny buy James Robinson off of me? So, yeah, he's not going to work out well either. You should sell James Robinson. I also have Kenny getting the dub. I'm interested to see how Wan'Dale Robinson does as a starter in this league. I didn't expect to see that in week 1. The last part of my notes is, can they both just lose? It's not like either one of them deserves a win. And I feel like the league, not a tie. Like we have to find out a way for both of them to lose. Like if they both score negative, can I go in as the commissioner and make it the losses for both of them? Because I feel like that's what we need to go for here because this is not a matchup. Yeah, I'm not a fan of this matchup. Cam Akers, fuck Cam Akers, fuck you, JR. Don't draft people I tell you not to. Next up was a matchup that I would have told you last week was going to be an absolute blowout to one side. And now I think I'm going to pick the other side. Darren versus Xavier. Nobody had anybody go on Monday night, it doesn't look like. So we're looking at a 0-0 matchup. Dan, what are your thoughts?
Well, Xavier's team does look better now than it did before. I still think that Darren's team overall is still pretty good. And I think that he'll still get that win.
I think Xavier's team really comes down to who and what is Drake London. Nick Bosa could be a problem just because I think you could see a lot of sacks in that game. I don't like Chicago at all. Darren has the Colts, which I absolutely love, but Xavier counters it with Denver going up against Seattle. Like the special teams part of this, because I love Jordan Brooks with Seattle as well. Every bit of that is great. I love Xavier's running backs and flex. I do not know how I feel about Mike Gesicki this week either, because we're going to, I guess, yeah, we'll talk about this. Bill Belichick has a way of shutting down any team's wide receiver one, and you would think he's going to target Tyreek Hill and shut him down. So does that open things up for Mike Gesicki? Over the season, I don't like Mike Gesicki, but that could change for this matchup. So this matchup could literally come down to the most boring Drake London versus Mike Gesicki to make the final decision for me. Who did you have winning?
I have Darren winning.
Let's see. Nope. I said, oh, I did. I said, give me Darren at the very end of my notes. So clearly I favor Mike Gesicki in the Mike Gesicki versus Drake London matchup. So there you go. Steve versus Steve. There can be only one. I'm interested to hear your take on this one because you clearly don't like Stevie's team as much as I do, but Stevie's team certainly jumped out to a very quick lead with that Buffalo defense, 26-0 right now. Horvath did not have anybody play on Thursday night.
If we had recorded this on Thursday before the first game, I would have been all over Horvath winning. Obviously, having the advantage of seeing that big old 26 points by the Bills defense gives Steve a nice advantage. But Horvath having 49ers defense going against Chicago, he could have a good matchup there. Obviously, I don't know. I'd probably say Stevie's going to win just because of that defense. It's going to be tough to overcome that.
Yep. So I was looking it over and thought I would 100% come out with Stevie winning this matchup, but I actually think it's going to be Horvath. I love Alvin Kamara going up against Atlanta this week, and James Conner. Arizona has no weapons. I think this could be an enormous James Conner week, and as everybody knows, I adore Horvath's wide receivers, and you hit the nail on the head. I wasn't sure if you were going to go there. I love what Buffalo did, but I was actually down on Buffalo. Oops. But San Francisco could match, if not top that, going up against a very, very bad Chicago defense. So I think Horvath can make that gap up. So give me Steve Horvath in this matchup. This was, I thought, going to be my wild card, and I expected you to accidentally be on my side, but we flipped on that. So.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I'd like, again, Horvath, in my opinion, has a great team. I think that I would not be surprised if he came out and won, but I think it's a lot to overcome a defensive start like that.
Look, Horvath is going to give his team the kind of victory speech they need to get. They're not going to be worried about an insane Buffalo Thursday night matchup, and they're going to come back. All right, before we get into ours, we have Mott's and the new guy. Mott's versus Greg. When you take a look at the projections, it looks like Mott's jumps out to a big lead with his boy Josh Allen at quarterback, but he also started Devin Singletary, who had a relatively quiet night. The projections now have Rob winning by 16 points here. What are your thoughts?
I mean, even before Josh Allen's great night, I would have predicted Rob to win. I still stand by that. I think Rob has a better team. Greg has some nice pieces, but just doesn't have the depth all the way through his starting lineup. You just don't know what you can get on Michael Thomas. Having Pollard in your starting lineup. Ertz is questionable. There's just a lot of concerns there with Greg's team right now, and I think Rob's going to walk away to a nice Sunday victory with no stress.
I have Rob winning by 10, but I did want to note, and I don't know if it would make up the full 10 points, and I don't even know 100% how this would work. I disagree with benching Dak Prescott, and I know this was a debate we had in the preseason show. Aaron Rodgers, now you're looking at no Allen Lazard on top of everything else that's going on there. And I think Tampa Bay Dallas is going to be one of the more high-scoring, exciting games of the week, and you could see Dak Prescott, even if it's not a great game for him, I think you could see 4 touchdowns out of Dak Prescott this week, and I don't think you could see that out of Aaron Rodgers.
I agree with you on that. I think that Prescott definitely has the higher ceiling. He could just be going with the lower floor. You know, whoever has, I think Rodgers isn't going to come out and have.
I think you mean to say the higher floor, but you're absolutely right. Aaron Rodgers does have the lower floor.
No, I think Dak Prescott has a lower floor. I could see Prescott coming out and not having a great game. I don't know. I mean, I don't trust CeeDee Lamb. I don't know.
I do trust CeeDee Lamb. He is going to be one of Brian's 40-point scorers this week. So I'm a big CeeDee Lamb guy. I decided to leave your team for last since I'm in control and I wanted to end it with your team. So we take a look at my matchup, and Taylor has a guy on his team who creates a bit of a problem in every matchup. Cooper Kupp with 13 receptions, 128 yards, and a touchdown. Would have been an absolute blowout, except for, Matt Stafford barely scored more points than Allen Robinson. So Taylor has to be a little worried at quarterback at this point, but Cooper Kupp obviously alleviates some of those worries. What is your take on me and Taylor's matchup?
So I think it's absolutely a normal possibility that your running backs and quarterback could get you right back into that game, because I don't trust Kareem Hunt to do much right away this first game. But the question is, will your receivers be able to keep up with his receivers? Because I could easily see all three of his receivers with 25 plus points and having monster games, and you getting possibly blown out of the water. But it comes down to really Jonathan Taylor and Mahomes. Can they carry your team this week to make up for those receivers?
So
if you're asking my opinion on who I think, I think Taylor's probably going to walk away with the win this week. It's tough to look at those three receivers and think that, when you've already had one of your receivers go and pretty much lay an egg with that one catch, it's just going to be tough for you to come back from that.
So I 100% agree with that. And I want to go back to something, because and I'm doing it again this week, I was too professional with the first episode. And you mentioned you wanted to say something about my wide receivers, and I cut you off because I was super down on my wide receivers. Are you ready now to join me and be super down on my wide receivers?
I'm not super down. No, I'm not going to sit here on week one and act like, oh my God, the world's on fire because Allen Robinson had one bad game. No, I think that's overreaction. I know and if I was you, I'd probably be really worried too. I think Allen Robinson will have a better games ahead of him. I'm not super down on your receivers. Are they great? Are they Taylor's receivers? Obviously not. Are they enough that they're going to stop you from making the playoffs? No, they're not. You still have a good enough team. You're going to be fine. I just think that if you're going against someone and first guy is dropping 30 and then there's two great players right behind him, it's tough to overcome that for anybody. When you already have one guy laying it, because when you have that, I think you really need the rest of your team. You can't count on one guy coming out and just dropping 30, 40 points to get you caught back up there. You need some solid points from everybody to keep you in that matchup, and you just didn't get it to start. And just like you said, they're not. I think Mooney could have a good game. I don't necessarily trust AJ Dillon. You and I have had that discussion.
Yeah.
But if you look at it like this, with no Tyreek Hill in Kansas City, if Mahomes hits Kelsey for 3 touchdowns, which is within the realm of possibility, 100%. You're right back in there, because like you kind of laid an egg for him. So
I say you've kind of went where I went with that. Is I do have Taylor winning this matchup. I'm willing to take the L. The things I need to have happen are Mahomes to have a big day and half of that big day to go to Kelsey. And I also need to be right about Bill Belichick shutting down Tyreek Hill. And Bill Belichick has shut down Tyreek Hill in the past. And that was when he had to worry about Travis Kelsey and Patrick Mahomes. Now he has to worry about Tua and Jalen Waddle. I don't think Belichick's going to be that worried. I think the stat is, Tyreek Hill had 1 catch for 7 yards the last time he faced the New England Patriots.
So here's my thoughts. I think this matchup is going to be the game of the week to watch. I think it's going to go back and forth a little bit as you're playing on Sunday at 4:00 with the Chiefs game.
Yeah.
But I'm necessarily not counting on Bill Belichick shutting out Tyreek Hill for a couple of reasons. I feel like Bill Belichick, for whatever reason, struggles against the Dolphins. That's the one team that they find a way that, I don't know if it's just luck, whatever it is, but if you look back at some of their games, Dolphins find ways to play well against the Patriots. While they still lose, they play well. And I just don't know. It's the first game of that coach and that offense. I think Belichick, if he has knows that offense, knows what they're trying to do a little bit more, it's easier to shut them down. You don't exactly know what that offense is going to look like and do.
24 minutes into this show, I just noticed your screen name. I am not a big fan of yours right now. I'm going back and forth between the notes I have and everything. This is how professional we are, guys. I got notes. Dan's looking down at his notes. I did not even notice this man's screen name. Holy shit. Dan, let's get into your matchup, because if you had told me before the season, or a week ago or 5 days ago, I would have said Dan wins. super easy. I do have a problem with one of Phil's starting lineup, with one of your starting lineup. I apologize. Oh, you switched it already. Never mind. Lance over Brady, I thought was an enormous mistake, and you fixed it. So Phil jumps out to an enormous lead, and I want to give Phil a little bit of credit. Ballsy start on Zach Moss, and while 5 points isn't enormous, 5 points out of Zach Moss is enormous. That is not a start I would have had the guts to make. So good for Phil on that one. And then Stephon Diggs is Stephon Diggs. I'll go first, Dan, and then you can talk about if you're worried at all. But my notes on this matchup were that I don't agree with Lance over Brady. It was a little bit too ballsy for me. You fixed it, and I'm good with it. Godwin and Kittle are kind of like the big factors in this matchup because it's sounding more and more like Kittle's not going to play. And I don't know. I don't believe you have a backup tight end on roster. So you're going to have to make a cut this early in this. Oh, you do. You have Pat Freiermuth. Never mind. So you do have a great backup.
Will you even look at my team, Ryan?
Oh my God. I scrolled. I did the starters. But anyway, great call by Phil on Moss. As I said, it's really going to come down to, I think, Godwin and Kittle. Freiermuth is a great backup, and I do like Freiermuth a lot this week. I am worried about Chris Godwin. I have Phil beating you, Dan. As much as I like your team, as much as I have you better than Phil, I think the big matchup from Diggs and even the small bit of mediocrity he got out of Zach Moss, I think helps him a lot going into this matchup. I like your team a lot better now that you're starting Brady. I think you have a fighter's chance. I don't think you would have with Lance. I think Brady is the better call this week. But I have Phil beating you mainly on the back of losing Godwin and not knowing what's going on with Kittle in week 1. Tell me why I'm wrong.
So if this changes your mind at all, Godwin will not be starting. I'm benching him and putting Pearson in my flex.
Okay. I hate Pierce this week too. So.
Oh. I just wanted to see how the practice ended up playing out with them guys not practicing on Thursday. Kittle will probably not be playing as well, so Freiermuth will be in for that substitution. Now, real quick, the reason why Lance was in there is because I wasn't going to cut players before I had to. I had 3 guys.
Okay. You were still over your roster limit until yesterday.
Let's have some fantasy advice here, guys. Stop cutting players before you have to. You don't know what injuries are going to happen. Like to me, I don't understand why people are cutting people when you don't need to.
Yeah, the ones that did it on draft day were the most befuddling. I'm like, it doesn't matter if you're over your roster limit, guys.
Yes, it does not make any sense to me. You don't know what injuries can happen. So I was going to hold on to those guys until I absolutely had to cut them. Brady will start. I don't think Kittle plays. There'll be Freiermuth in there, and I will put Pearson for Godwin as well. Am I worried? Yeah, because he's off to a good start. It's nice. Diggs had a great game for him. I'm happy Moss only got 5 points. I wish it would have been more like 0, because that was within the realm of possibility with those running backs in Buffalo.
There can only be one Cam Akers.
Obviously, you're worried when Diggs has a pretty good game there, but overall, I think I still should win. I have myself winning. Again, I think Phil is the second worst team in the league. I don't expect much out of Cooper or Pickens necessarily this week. I love Hurts. I think he could have a pretty good game. But again, if Hurts is having a good game, that means A.J. Brown's having a good game more than likely. Yeah. So I still think I win. But obviously, that's obviously makes you a little nervous when you see Diggs putting up 20-plus points to start the week.
I imagine so. I think nobody is surprised, especially not Brian, that you've picked yourself to win. Brian likes to point out that you love your team.
Brian hates my team no matter what. I could literally have the best starting lineup in the history of fantasy football, and Brian would tell me how bad they are. Brian tries to make it his professional career to hate my team. I apologize about the kids' noise right now.
Dan has hostages. Well, Dan, let's get to the last episode, which you definitely can't talk about. Our last segment that I haven't told you about, but we definitely can't talk about with your kids in the room. I've decided to call this segment the happy ending, but I put a question mark at the end because when Deshaun Watson's involved, somebody usually leaves the room crying. So you added Deshaun Watson, and I think there's only one question. What the fuck, Dan?
Some Browns fan is going to make a trade for him, and I'm going to be on the other end of that trade.
So it's funny to me because you're basically just straight up pandering to Browns fans and waving in the face their stupidity, and you still believe, like every Browns fan in the league knows that you added him to trade with them later. But I think this is probably on the back of you once saw Kenny trade for Baker Mayfield twice in the same season. So if that type of stupidity exists in the world, why aren't we trading for rapists?
Oh, they will at some point, whether it's at the trade deadline, right before, he's getting ready to come back, they see the Browns maybe close to 500, thinking, oh my goodness, Deshaun Watson's going to come back and take us to the playoffs, and I really want him on my team because they know they're only going to be a quarterback away from being a pretty good team. If Deshaun Watson comes out and plays great, which it's an if, who knows? If he's not getting his massages, who knows how he's going to react to that?
Right, it's going to be tight.
Or is he going to be tight and playing great because of it? Who knows? Maybe he's getting too many massages before.
Maybe he was a better quarterback if he was not having these issues. That's the first take I've heard of that.
But yes, no, I solely think that someone's going to make a trade for him at some point out of love for the Browns, whether it's Kenny, Phil, Taylor. Somebody's going to want him. Who knows?
If you get anything, especially now that I've made you mention it publicly, if you get anything, what a win for you. I'd be proud of you in this situation.
Here's the worst case scenario. Fantasy football is not about emotions and favorite players. I know Brian cares about having his favorite players on his team. Let's say Deshaun Watson, nobody trades for him. I just have him on my roster. And let's say those last 5 games he comes out and does great. I'll keep him on my team.
There you go. Could be the thing that gets you a chance. What if it was a running joke until 2020 that Brett Favre was the reason that I won or had made the Final Four of the playoffs? What if you win your fucking 3rd championship with Deshaun Watson at your quarterback? There's a weird asterisk at the end. It's brown. It's not good. But
then I will take those fantasy winnings and donate them to sexual
That's
abuse.
what I'm doing in all of my leagues where I added Watson in a few 2 quarterback leagues towards there's no excuse for it. I'm going to do the same if I win anything in those leagues.
Don't get me wrong. I hate the Browns. I despise Deshaun Watson. Want nothing to do with him. But you can't play fantasy football with emotions and just wanting your favorite players if you're actually trying to win.
Yeah, nobody was dropping Ray Rice. Let's be clear about that. So until the league dropped Ray Rice.
It feels dirty, but at the end of the day, I got to do what's best for the Squirrels. I got to make sure that 10-5 turns into an 11-5.
What's best for the Squirrels? You son of a bitch. All right, guys, every Saturday we're going to be doing this unless something comes up and then we have a backup day planned. We're going to have guests. If you guys want to be a guest, get at me. A few of you already have. We'll get it all figured out. Dan, do you have any parting words for the people?
No, just looking forward to that 11-5, Ryan. No. Congratulations to Phil. I'm happy for you. Way to win the team up to the 2nd worst.
Phil, I have you as 4th worst.
I definitely didn't hear from his girlfriend about how upset he was about me calling his team last. That did not happen.
Wow.
Oh, wait, it actually did happen. Sorry, Phil.
Oh, Phil, that's not a good look. I think we're just going to end on that. Don't have your girlfriends yell at people who say your team is bad. Have a good day, everybody.